This episode of Please Explain is sponsored by Aware Super, helping you get more from your future.
From the newsrooms of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, this is Please Explain. I'm Chris Payne. It's Wednesday, July 12. Last week, Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, released a new app, Threads.
Has Twitter finally met its match? It only launched last night, but Meta's new Twitter rival is already exploding in popularity. Threads takes direct aim.
Threads became the most rapidly downloaded app ever, amassing a whopping 30 million downloads in just 16 hours.
And has seen more than 30 million users sign up since yesterday's launch.
Now the app has more than 100 million users and is growing by the day.
Announcing Threads reached 10 million signups in its first 7 hours. Celebrities from Oprah to Kim Kardashian to Jennifer Lopez already joining the app.
Threads is a text-based social media conversation app. If that sounds a bit familiar, you might be thinking Twitter. In fact, some are calling Threads the Twitter killer because the similarities between the platforms are so uncanny. So, what's behind Threads' enormous popularity? Can it last? And will it spell the end of Twitter? Today, culture editor Osman Faruqi on Threads, Twitter, and our never-ending desire for distraction. Oz, tell me when you first heard about Threads, what your initial impressions of the app were. What do you reckon?
So it was actually a few days before the app launched. I saw people sharing screenshots of their app store on their iPhone that said this new app from Meta, which is the company that runs Instagram and Facebook, called Threads, was going to launch. And it was an attempt to recreate the functionality of something like Twitter, but do it within that kind of Meta style of creating an app. So this looks pretty interesting. And the next couple of days, I kept an eye on it to see when it would be launching. Then I was actually at home sick, not feeling great, was pretty bored, and I saw that Threads had gone live. And Chris, I actually haven't posted on Twitter in a couple of years, despite being a pretty prolific poster back in my day. And I thought, well, why not give this a go? Let's see what this is all about. So I downloaded the app. I was one of the first people, I guess, in the world to give it a go. My Thread user number is 17,224. So I was the 17,224th person to sign into Threads. And I started posting. I started playing around with it. And I guess in the weeks since it launched, I'm still there. I'm still posting. So it seems to have done something for me.
Okay, so we've got you sitting on the couch, you're sipping chicken soup. You've signed up for Threads, the rebirth of a takesman. So you've spent about a week engaging with this new app, or less than a week. What are you thinking so far? It does, I have to say, I've used it as well. It does look a lot like Twitter. Like if you just open the app and you scroll through the feed, it looks and feels like Twitter. But do you think it is like Twitter?
I think you're spot on that the initial reaction to how the app looks and how it feels is very, very similar to Twitter. And I think that makes sense because this really was built as Meta's attempt to take advantage of the misfortunes of Twitter at the moment, a feeling from users that Twitter isn't doing what it used to, that perhaps it's gotten too toxic, it's too divisive, it's run by Elon Musk, a guy who's made a lot of changes to the app that users don't like. So I think what Meta is trying to do with Threads is have something that looks basically the same and has the same kind of functionality. You have a feed, which is largely text-based posts. Occasionally there's photos and videos. You can post short things there as well. One of the key differences, the character limit on Threads is 500 characters. On Twitter, it's 280, unless you pay for Twitter verification. And you follow people, they follow you. You interact with their posts, you can reply, you can favorite, you can retweet or rethread. So on the surface, it looks basically like a Twitter clone. But when you start to play around there, you see that there are actually quite a few significant differences, both to the functionality of the app and the kind of community that it's fostered and the kinds of posts that you read.
From my early reading of the app, there's a few different kinds of posts. There's the I've thought for 3 days about my first Threads post / joke, and here it is. There are brands trying to act like comedians. There are people who basically act exactly the same way that they did on Twitter on Threads. And then there's a ton of memes / engagement bait. Does that about sum it up? And which of those streams do you think is going to kind of dominate the algorithm as we move forward?
I think it does sum it up. I think the other way that I would describe it is it's almost the opposite of Twitter in terms of what is being posted and what is being boosted by the app's algorithm. I think there's such a deliberate intent from the creators of Threads to avoid the political division, the focus on news, and the toxicity of a platform like Twitter. So we know this, that the creators have been very upfront that they have got a lot of moderating going on. There's a tendency to ban controversial far-right figures. There's lots of specific tools to manage hate speech. And we also know that they are not prioritizing news and politics, instead wanting to foster conversations around fashion, sport, community, TV, entertainment, those sorts of things. So what you end up with is a lot of memes, as you pointed out, a lot of generic kind of platitudes. Think about the Facebook posts from the last 4 or 5 years, the kind of, don't even talk to me until I've had my first cup of coffee.
I didn't realize you were Facebook friends with my parents.
Who else would I be Facebook friends with, Chris? They're the only people left on the website. And there's a lot of brands posting very, very earnestly. And it seems like there's a desire there from the creators of Threads to create a very safe environment for posters, for creators, and for brands.
Threads versus Twitter has been a battle of the platforms, but also a battle of the billionaires. Mark Zuckerberg seems to be enjoying himself, posting on Twitter and trying to bait Elon. And now Elon has fired back and actually threatened to take legal action against Threads. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's really an interesting point to look at this battle of these two companies through the lens of their proprietors as well, because I do think there is a personal ego driving this battle between Twitter and Threads. I mean, it was only a couple of weeks ago that Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg were quite seriously talking about actually getting in a cage match together. That, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you think about these things, didn't come to fruition, but we seem to be seeing that cage match playing out in the battle of these two apps. I think the fact that Threads went live during a particular nadir for Twitter is really significant. I think they'd clearly been working on this app for quite a while, but Mark Zuckerberg took the opportunity to strike when there was a lot of controversy over recent changes Twitter had made to its app. The user base was starting to soften. There were people getting really frustrated with how Twitter was operating. And then, as you pointed out, Mark Zuckerberg posted his first tweet in over a decade the day that Threads went live, which felt like a very obvious attempt to needle Elon Musk. And Elon Musk has then retaliated. He's had some personal digs at Mark Zuckerberg on Twitter, but he's also accused Zuckerberg and Meta of stealing their staff and their intellectual property. Now, Threads say, well, you actually very famously made thousands of your staff redundant and you didn't give them an opportunity to finish up their work at Twitter. We then decided to hire them. That is completely legitimate. But I think it is safe to say that this is not just a battle between two tech companies. This is a battle between two tech titans and their competing visions for what the internet should look like.
I just want to read out a list to you and talk about this as a kind of moment in internet culture. Netflix took 3.5 years to get 1 million users. Twitter, 2 years. Facebook, 10 months. Spotify, 5 months. It took 1 hour for Threads to hit 1 million users, and now it's well past 100 million. What does that say about the platform? But more, what does it say about us?
I think there's a few things to say about Threads' enormous growth. I think it is, as you mentioned, unparalleled. We've not seen a, not just social media app, but any kind of internet tool, whether that's a streaming platform like Netflix or YouTube, reach this kind of success so fast, which I think speaks to two things. I think, one, it shows that there is a desire for people to have a social networking service that does what Twitter was trying to do, but perhaps in a less aggressive and intense sort of format. I think it also says that we love connecting, we love finding communities, we love talking, and we love wasting time, right? I think that is a huge part of the modern human existence. But I think there's an important caveat to add to those numbers, which is that Threads isn't starting from zero, right? It is part of the Meta universe. Instagram and Facebook are some of the most popular websites in the world, and Instagram was the original kind of leverage point for this app. Like when you went onto Instagram, you were pushed the Threads app, you were encouraged to follow and send notifications to everyone you followed or who followed you to jump on board. And when you look at who's got the biggest following on Threads, it does mirror follower bases on Instagram as well. So it's not exactly a 1-for-1 conversion rate, but a lot of people have migrated from Instagram to Threads and brought their followers over with them. Now, that's a small caveat, but I think even being able to pull that off and attract a whole bunch of new people who've come from Twitter, who've come from non-Meta platforms is significant. I think the question now, Chris, is will it be able to sustain not just its growth, but the level of engagement that it's seen in its first few days?
I want to ask you about the algorithm, like capital T, capital A, which is the thing that makes or breaks platforms. It changes user behavior, it responds to user behavior, and it's something that is impossible for us to predict. They're all battling each other to try and get the best algorithm. Now, certainly the early sense on Threads is that they're exposing you to a lot of different things to see what sticks, and it's less of the kind of friends and family feel that Facebook has moved towards and Instagram is more known for. Do you have a sense of where you think the algorithm might go in the next 6 months, like once they test and learn? Or if you don't, do you have a sense of where you would like it to go as someone who's used it?
I think the key thing to point out about the Threads algorithm is that it is probably the most powerful in terms of how it dictates what you see in your feed compared to any other social app right now. There is no way on Threads at this current moment to just consume content from people you've chosen to follow. Threads is putting its thumb on the scale quite heavily. Most of the content you see is coming from accounts you don't follow that the algorithms decided deserve high engagement, or at least they're in a process of testing out what works and what doesn't work. Now, big companies love having opaque algorithms like that because it allows them to, like I said, put their thumb on the scale, shift things in a direction that they want to create the kind of community vibe, the kind of tonal vibe, and particularly from an advertising sense, a safe for advertisers vibe that helps them meet their corporate goals, which is essentially to sell ads and have those ads seen by lots and lots of people. Twitter has experimented with, I guess, a raft of different approaches to its algorithm in the past few years. It, at this current moment, offers what is largely undiluted by an algorithm, a feed that is just people you follow in chronological order, but it also has an option called the For You page, which is a bit more like TikTok, which is just high-performing content that you might not follow that you get to see as well. I think the option to strap yourself into the river of the algorithm is a good one, but I also think what made apps like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram so successful was that you as a user could choose what you wanted to see. If there was someone you didn't like, you weren't forced to engage with their content. I personally think that having the option to choose between a curated feed that you set the boundaries of and an algorithmic feed that uses the best brains in software engineering to provide content that you might not know exists, but actually hits the sweet spot for you is the way to go. It remains to be seen whether Threads will go there. In the past, Meta has not been that keen on going back to purely user-controlled feeds, but because they are filling in this gap that Twitter has left, there's a big demand from users for something that looks a bit more like Twitter, i.e. something that you decide in terms of what you see.
And what about you, Oz? Are you enjoying it? Man sitting on his couch, you take landing, you're getting good follows. Are you liking it?
Well, I'm not as sick anymore, Chris, and I've sort of struggling to find the time to really engage with Threads. And I've got to say, the thing that is keeping me away from really diving in is the algorithm problem. You know, the ashes have been on, right? And one of the best things about something like Twitter is just having that open on your phone while you watch people react to what's happening. You can't do that on Threads. Instead, you're getting posts from a day, 2 days, 3 days ago, random memes, random photos from accounts you don't follow. It makes it really hard to feel like you're in that sort of collective experience with millions of people around the world. So if I'm really honest with you, I don't see myself sticking around on this app for a very long time. But I do think one thing that the app's got going for it, which is what a lot of other Twitter clones like Blue Sky and Mastodon don't, is the sheer number of very high-profile people who are on it, right? Politicians, athletes, celebrities have jumped on Threads very, very quickly. And I think that will give it a staying power because you want to be where politicians are announcing things that impact you. You want to be where musicians announce their latest work. You want to be where NBA players announce what team they're going to. And I think if Threads can keep up that momentum, it could be here to stay.
Yeah, I'm super interested to see where it goes and how it evolves. You can keep track of Oz on Threads at Oz_Faruqi for an Australian icon. You can also listen to him on The Drop with Osman Faruqi. Thanks so much for joining Please Explain.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Today's episode of Please Explain was produced by Chi Wong. Our executive producer is Ruby Schwartz. Please Explain is a production of The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. If you enjoy the show and want more of our journalism, subscribe to our newspapers today. It's the best way to support what we do. Search The Age or smh.com.au/subscribe. I'm Chris Payne. This is Please Explain. Thank you for listening.
This episode of Please Explain was brought to you by Aware Super. With super advice and super returns, Aware Super is super helpful. For more information about Aware Super, including their PDS and TMD, visit aware.com.au.